Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into an incredible story unfolding in Nepal, where the energy of a generation often underestimated, Generation Z, has sparked a movement so powerful it's brought down a government. That's right. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli was forced to step down in September 2025, and the protests that led to this moment were so intense that they set the Prime Minister's residence ablaze, torched parts of the parliament, and even saw a finance minister chased through the streets by protesters hitting him with shoes. Tragically, the chaos also claimed lives, including the wife of a former prime minister, whose home was set on fire during the unrest. So, what's behind all this anger? Was it just a social media ban that pushed people over the edge? Well, friends, the answer is a lot more complicated than that. There were multiple triggers fueling these protests, and in this video, we're going to unpack them all, step by step, to understand what's really going on in Nepal. Let's get started. On September 8, 2025, thousands of people poured into the streets of Kathmandu, Nepal's capital city. Most of them were young, aged 20 to 25, the heart of Gen Z. Some were still in their school uniforms, others in college gear, all united in a march that began at Madigar Mandala, a symbolic monument in the city, heading toward the parliament. This wasn't just a random gathering. It was organized by an NGO called Hami Nepal, and at first it was peaceful, almost entirely non-violent. The protesters were chanting, holding signs, and making their voices heard. But then the government stepped in, deploying police to stop the march. Things escalated quickly. The police didn't hold back. They used water cannons, tear gas, and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. Some protesters, undeterred, pushed forward and even made it inside the parliament complex. What happened next shocked the nation. The police opened fire with live bullets. Yes, live ammunition. At least 19 protesters were killed and over 400 were injured. Among the casualties was a 12-year-old child. This wasn't just a crackdown, it was a tragedy that would ignite an even bigger fire. The news of this brutal response spread like wildfire. Nepali citizens, horrified by the violence, didn't stay silent. Instead, more people joined the protests, flooding the streets of Kathmandu and beyond. By the next day, the movement had grown massive, with roads packed with demonstrators. The government tried to impose a curfew at 3:30 p.m. to regain control, but it was like trying to put out a forest fire with a garden hose. The protests didn't stop. They spread to other cities like Pokhara, Butwal, Bharatpur, and Demak. The anger wasn't just about the police violence anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had been simmering for years. While the media has focused heavily on a recent social media ban as the spark for these protests, that's only part of the story. The real fuel was a combination of systemic issues, corruption, misgovernance, skyrocketing unemployment, and blatant nepotism among Nepal's political elite. Let's break these down, but first, let's talk about that social media ban since it's gotten so much attention. Back in November 2023, the Nepali government issued a directive requiring all social media companies to register with the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology and establish a local presence in the country. The official reasoning to curb hate speech, fake news, fraud, and other cybercrimes sounds reasonable on paper, right? But many saw it as a thinly veiled attempt to control online spaces and silence dissent. The government issued 5 public notices over time, but most major platforms, think Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, Snapchat, and X, didn't comply. Only a handful of apps registered, including one big name, TikTok. Then, on August 28, 2025, the government gave platforms a final deadline to register by September 3 or face a ban. Most ignored it, and true to its word, the government banned 26 major social media platforms. Everything except TikTok was blocked. Protesters argued this was a deliberate move to suppress free speech and control the narrative, especially since social media had become a powerful tool for exposing corruption and nepotism. As one protester put it, they want to control us just like a dictator. And they weren't wrong. Videos exposing the lavish lifestyles of politicians' kids, dubbed Nepo Kids, were going viral, and the government wasn't happy about it. Now, let's talk about those deeper issues, because the social media ban was just the tip of the iceberg. Nepal's youth are fed up, and for good reason. Corruption is rampant, and it's not just whispers. It's out in the open. The same group of aging politicians, most in their 70s, have been rotating power for years with little to show for it. Since Nepal became a republic in 2008, after abolishing its 239-year-old monarchy, the country has seen 14 different governments, none completing a full 5-year term. Leaders like KP Sharma Oli, Pushpa Kamal Dahal, and Dahal Deuba keep cycling through the Prime Minister's office, forming and breaking coalitions, while accusations of corruption follow them like shadows. For example, Dahal Deuba, head of the Nepali Congress, is accused of taking illegal commissions for aircraft purchases. His wife, Foreign Affairs Minister Arzu Rana Deuba, faces allegations of forging documents to pass off Nepali citizens as Bhutanese refugees to send them to the US. Pushpa Kamal Dahal, a 3-time prime minister, is accused of siphoning off billions meant for Maoist fighters during the peace process. And Oli himself. He's under investigation for violating a Supreme Court order to turn a tea estate into commercial property. The kicker, a policy since 2006 grants politicians immunity for policy decisions, which basically means they can get away with almost anything. This has left the youth feeling betrayed by a system that protects the corrupt. Then there's the economy, or rather the lack of one. In 2024, Nepal's youth unemployment rate was a staggering 20.82%. That's 1 in 5 young people without a job. New job creation is practically non-existent, forcing thousands to look abroad for work. By February 2024, over 15,000 Nepalis had joined the Russian military to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war, lured by salaries and bonuses that could reach 4,000 a month, about 500,000 Nepali rupees. For many, it's a desperate choice, driven by the lack of opportunities at home. Some return in coffins, a grim reality that protesters highlighted with signs reading, "Politicians' children bring Gucci bags from abroad, while the children of the common people are brought in coffins." The contrast is stark. While ordinary Nepalis struggle, the Nepo Kids of politicians flaunt designer clothes, luxury cars, and overseas trips on social media, fueling resentment. The Fen Nepo Kids and Faith Nepo Baby hashtags took off on TikTok, where videos juxtaposed the hardships of everyday Nepalis with the extravagance of the elite. When the government banned social media, it wasn't just about control. It threatened livelihoods, especially in tourism, which relies heavily on platforms like Instagram and WhatsApp for bookings and outreach. With over 7 million Nepalis working abroad, these apps are also a lifeline for families to stay connected. The protests weren't just about the ban, though. They were a cry against a system that's been failing Nepal's youth for years. Back in March 2025, there were even protests calling for a return to the monarchy, with some arguing that the republic experiment had failed. Before 2008, Nepal was ruled by a king, with Gyanendra as the last monarch. Two major movements, the democracy revolution of 2006 and the Maoist insurgency, toppled the monarchy, and on May 28, 2008, Nepal became a federal democratic republic. The promise was a new Nepal, but 17 years later, the dream feels more like a nightmare. The constant political musical chairs with the same old faces, Oli Dahal Deuba, has left people disillusioned. The two dominant political forces, the Nepali Congress and the Communist parties, split into the united Marxist, Leninist, and Maoist center factions, keep forming shaky coalitions, only to collapse under the weight of their own corruption and infighting. Protesters, especially Gen Z, are demanding systemic reforms, transparency, and accountability. They're not just asking for resignations, they want the entire parliament dissolved and fresh elections held. The government's response only made things worse. When protesters hit the streets on September 8, they were met with brutal force. The police didn't just use tear gas or rubber bullets. They fired live rounds, killing 19 people and injuring hundreds. The outrage was immediate. Home Minister Ramesh Lakhak resigned that evening, citing moral responsibility, but it wasn't enough to calm the crowds. By September 9, the protests had turned chaotic. Demonstrators set fire to the Prime Minister's residence, the President's residence, the Parliament, and even the Supreme Court. The Singha Durbar, Nepal's administrative headquarters, was stormed, and the Nepali Congress Party's offices were torched. Some protesters took it further, attacking the homes of political leaders like Dahal Deuba. In the chaos, the wife of a former prime minister lost her life when their house was set on fire. The Nepali army was deployed to restore order, and by Tuesday night, they were patrolling the streets with helicopters airlifting ministers to safety. Oli finally resigned around 2 p.m. on September 9, citing the extraordinary situation in a letter posted by an aide. The social media ban was lifted that same day, but the damage was done. As I'm recording this, the protests haven't stopped. The army chief has called for peace and dialogue, and there's talk of former Supreme Court Chief Justice Sushila Karki stepping in as an interim leader, chosen by protest leaders in a virtual mini-election on Discord. But the streets are still restless, and there's a real fear of a power vacuum. Some groups are even pushing to restore the monarchy, seeing former King Jainendra as a symbol of resistance against a broken system. Others, though, insist the solution lies in strengthening democracy, not abandoning it. Nepal's Gen Z has made it clear they're done with corruption, nepotism, and a government that ignores their struggles. This is a wake-up call for leaders everywhere. Ignore the people's needs, and things can spiral out of control fast. Thanks for watching, and let's hope Nepal finds a peaceful path forward.